Yes, Rex, I want to start with you. You always have an opinion on this slow play. Sometimes you're actually subjected to it out there. Does the Tour have a genuine problem on its hands here, or is this just another kind of outrage cycle that we see every once in a while?
No, it's obviously a general problem. It's an outrage, is what it is. And I loved what Dottie said. I actually rewound it and watched it a couple of times when she said it in the middle of the telecast. And I love the idea of respect, but I'll add another word to this. This is about will. The Tour's lack of a will to enforce the penalties that they already have in place. I'm not talking about putting new things, new regulations in place to try to speed up play. Just go to what you have and enforce it, because I'm with you. The money's not going to make a difference. The only way you're going to make a difference if you start assessing one-stroke penalties, and that's the difference between you finishing 50th or 51st on this year's FedEx Cup points list. Suddenly you are going to start playing faster, and I will go to TGL. The PGA Tour has the cheat code. Just tune in tonight when Tiger plays Rory's team. The 40-second shot clock works. The players can play fast. I know you're taking the elements out of it, being in that arena. However, you can do this on the golf course in some sort of limited capacity and speed up play if you had the will.
George, what's your solution?
Yeah, and I agree overall holistically with Rex. I think from a functionality standpoint, golf's the most complex sport you can have when you have 78 players playing at once the first half of the field if it's a 156-man event. So then you have, spotters that are having to wear a shot clock. The PGA Tour's policy when it comes to pace of play was enacted in 1994. It has been feckless for the last 31 years. In 1995, Glenn Day was the last guy to actually get a shot penalty. Since then, they've only gone with fines, and the problem has gotten substantially worse over time. And there's a competitive imbalance. Slow players impact fast players. Fast players do not impact slow players because slow players know they're only going to pay a monetary fine, but to them, that small fine comparatively is so much less than what the purses are that there's no incentive structure for them to actually change their pace of play. I was watching Ludwig Oberg last week, was doing one of the streams on ESPN Plus for the Farmers Insurance Open. He is one of the fastest players on the PGA Tour. The second his playing partner had hit their shot, he was already stepping into his. There are very small material changes that the PGA Tour can act from a policy standpoint as far as making sure guys are ready to play their shots instead of when we pan to a guy, he then begins his whole process with the player caddy conversation that we've grown accustomed to airing. Then they talk for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, then they step into their shot. I do think penalizing players' shots is the only way to actually get a response. It's just how do you execute that on such a large scale on the PGA Tour? That's why the PGA Tour rules officials have just thrown up their hands and said, this is the best we can do.
George, do you sense the stomach to face down the players on this, or do you think the SSG private equity guys who are now big investors in the Tour are going to grow concerned at this perception that the consumers of their product are just tired of it?
Well, Eamon, it's funny. I was Googling before the show, pace of play PGA Tour. There was an article in 2023 about changes they were going to make. There was an article in 2020, an article in 2018. It's every year or two, we have the exact same conversation and nothing changes. But when you look at, say, TGL or the attention span and how the younger generation consumes products and media, none of them want to go out and follow our final group for 5.5 hours. I totally agree with what Jordan said off the top. So if there's actually going to be substantive changes, I think SSG realizes not only is there a competitive imbalance with the players and the slow players then dictate the pace in which these events are played at, it is not good for the product on TV, nor is it good for the in-person experience. But, Eamon, I'm still waiting for SSG. We've been hearing since that they've made their primary investment. They have these dynamic ideas and changes involved with the PGA Tour, but they haven't been forward-facing with any of those. So I'm glass half full, hopeful that they will make some type of change, but we haven't seen anything to this date.
So, Rex, this kind of goes back to, ultimately for me, JT last week making waves with his plea to his colleagues to be more accessible with media, to help grow this game. So in that vein, knowing that some of the bigger voices are open to, hey, we've got to fix problems here to help get our numbers up, what do you think the percentage is that would have an agreement with what we're saying here? Bring in this shot clock. Let's speed things up. What do you think the percentage of pros that are saying, we're on board with this. What would you measure that, gauge that to be?
Jordan, you look at that memo that JT sent to players last week, and that was okay. It was about being more open with the media and the broadcast partners, trying to give fans a bit of a glimpse. But if you look at the DNA, this is about making the product better, and that's essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about pace of play. And to George's point, I would point out that you're right. We're having these conversations every year, every 2 years for the better part of my entire career. The one thing that is changing going into next year that I think could impact where we are on pace of play is field size. We all know that the fields are only getting smaller. I remember having this conversation with Mark Russell, the longtime PGA Tour rules official, for so long, of him lecturing me and telling me 156-player field, 144-player field cannot play fast. You run into a traffic jam. There's too many people on the golf course. Well, now the Tour has created a scenario where you don't have those. You don't have the traffic jams anymore. So as transitioning to that schedule and creating a different, better product for the fans, they can take a hard look at pace of play. I think we are at an inflection point where if the Tour had the will, they could change it.
George, on the subject of that Justin Thomas memo, you spend a lot of time out there interviewing players before and after their rounds. Some are more willing than others to join in on that process, and even more so, I guess, during a round. How likely do you think it is that you're going to see an uptake from players? It's certainly a positive sign, the desire to do so. Do you think enough players realise that the onus is on them a little bit more to sell their product?
I think they're slowly coming to that realization. I remember doing in-round interviews when we tested this fall of 2018, and we were trying to do it on a, say, like a 12th hole or something along those lines. It wasn't specific to a par 3, but we tested it. Players were a little reticent, died on the vine for a few years. We've since brought it back, and now guys have more collective buy-in to realize, hey, the more we can allow the consumer to peek under the hood, to understand what makes us tick, what goes in the shots, what variables we're weighing, that's what you see go viral in golf, in football, in basketball, in baseball, are these easily digestible minute to 2 minute social media clips where the average fan is getting to connect with the player on seemingly what feels like, from a fan side, a personal experience. So I do think Justin Thomas, who 5 years ago, I would have been doubtful that he would have been a guy championing that message necessarily. He totally gets it. I think having someone of that stature, of that cachet, and I do think the younger rookies or guys in their early to mid 20s are quicker to say, you know what, let's give this a shot. But conversely, if you're a guy battling for your card and it's towards the end of the season, I've had guys just say, you know what, I want nothing to do with this. I just want to focus on my game right now. So there's definitely a balance, Eamon.